creepy catfish dating stories. This is Mr. H. You're listening to Masked Horror. The perfect match. I matched with Alex on a dating app a few weeks ago. He was charming, well-traveled, and genuinely seemed to care about me. We'd text late into the night, talking about our dreams, fears, and even our childhoods. He seemed almost perfect, and over time, I started feeling a connection that felt real. Even though he always found an excuse to keep his camera off during video calls, I let it slide. After all, he made me feel like I'd known him for years. Then one evening, he asked me to meet him. He invited me to his family's cabin for a quiet, romantic dinner. I hesitated. Meeting at a secluded cabin seemed a bit strange, but he assured me his mom would be there, so I went along with it. When I pulled up to the cabin, nestled deep in the woods, something felt off. The place was surrounded by trees that seemed to close in around me, casting eerie shadows in the fading light. A small, rickety porch creaked as I approached, and before I could knock, an elderly woman opened the door. Her face was wrinkled, but kind, her eyes glinting with an unsettling excitement. "Oh, you must be Melanie," she beamed, pulling me inside. "I'm Alex's mother. He's been so excited to meet you, but he got held up and couldn't make it in time. Why don't you stay for dinner anyway?" I tried to hide my disappointment and unease, but something in her gaze felt hungry, as if she was sizing me up. She took my coat, and before I knew it, I was seated at an old, dusty dining table, facing an empty seat. As we started dinner, she began to talk about her daughter, who had passed away recently. She described this girl with such vivid detail, from her laugh to her favorite books. It was unnerving how she spoke of her, as if she was still alive, still a part of their lives. "I've been so lonely without her," she murmured, her voice barely a whisper. "But you remind me so much of her." A chill ran down my spine. I tried to change the subject, asking about Alex, but her responses became vague, almost evasive. I noticed her hands shaking as she reached for a small framed photograph on the table. She turned it toward me. It was a black and white picture, blurry and faded, but something about it felt wrong, like it had been tampered with. "Who is that?" I asked, my voice cracking. She smiled, a strange, empty smile. "That's my daughter. She would have been just about your age by now." I forced a laugh, hoping to ease the growing tension, but Alex said he was an only child. Her eyes widened, and then the smile faded. "Alex?" she repeated, almost confused. "There's no Alex, dear." My blood ran cold. I pushed back from the table, my hands shaking. Her face twisted into something sinister as she reached out, grabbing my arm with surprising strength. "Don't leave me," she whispered, her voice desperate, pleading. "You're just like her. I need you." I felt the fear rise in me, and without a second thought, I bolted from the table, my heart pounding as I ran for the door. The old woman called after me, her voice desperate and pleading, but I didn't look back. I yanked open the front door and sprinted down the narrow path, my feet slipping on the gravel as I darted past the trees that seemed to press in on me. Branches clawed at my skin, but I didn't stop, not until I reached my car. I sped down the winding road, the old cabin disappearing in my rearview mirror, but the memory burned into my mind. Even as I reached the main road, I couldn't shake the feeling that she was still watching, lurking just out of sight. That night, I deleted the dating app. I couldn't bear to see those profiles or scroll through strangers' pictures. I swore I'd never trust anyone from the internet again. Months passed, and slowly I moved on. I even met someone new, a kind, genuine guy at my gym. He's everything Alex pretended to be, but this time, it's real. I haven't told him about what happened that night. I try not to think about it myself, but every now and then, when I'm alone, a shiver creeps up my spine, and I remember that empty cabin and the woman who tried to claim me as her own. The innocent lie. I'd been talking to Alicia for weeks. She seemed too good to be true, funny, smart, and stunning in every photo she shared. We met on a dating app, and I was instantly hooked. She told me she was a single mom, balancing a demanding job and caring for her young son. I admired her dedication, and our conversations felt real. She had a way of making me feel like the center of her world. Finally, after what felt like ages, we made plans to meet in person at a cozy coffee shop in the city. I remember feeling nervous, adjusting my shirt in the cafe's bathroom, rehearsing what I'd say. I ordered our drinks and waited, watching the minutes tick by. Then, I got a text from Alicia. "Stuck in traffic. So sorry. Can you wait a bit longer?" she messaged. I shrugged it off, telling myself the wait would be worth it. An hour passed, then another. By then, my drink was cold, and the cafe was starting to empty out. A sinking feeling grew in my gut, but I stayed. I waited as people came and went, glancing hopefully every time someone walked through the door. Eventually, I gave up. Disappointed and feeling a bit foolish, I headed home. I told myself maybe something came up, that she would explain it later. The next morning, I woke up to a message from Alicia. "I'm so sorry for yesterday. Can I make it up to you?" Attached was a photo of me at the cafe, taken from behind. My shoulders tensed immediately. She'd said she was stuck in traffic, so how was she so close enough to snap that photo? I tried calling, but the number didn't connect. The strange, uneasy feeling gnawed at me, so I did some digging. I ran her profile photos through a reverse image search, hoping for some kind of explanation. The results hit me like a punch. Every photo she'd sent me was from the Instagram of a woman living across the country, a woman who clearly had no idea I existed. The more I searched, the darker it got. I combed through her online profiles, piecing together details that didn't add up. Alicia wasn't real. My mind raced as I thought back on every personal story I'd shared, every detail she knew about my life. Later that night, my phone buzzed with another text from her. "You looked so disappointed yesterday," it read, followed by a smiley face. My skin prickled. I knew someone had been there, watching me. My chest tightened as I realized I'd been lured into something much darker than a missed date. Then came the final message. "See you soon, Tom." I don't know if it was someone playing a practical joke on me or what, but I reported what I could to the police and I deleted the app. I also blocked the number, and I've stayed off dating apps and social media ever since. I only used YouTube. I guess that is considered social media. But if I ever use a dating app again, I will make sure to FaceTime the person before agreeing to meet up. The long-distance lure. After my divorce, I felt lost, like a stranger in my own life. So when Paul messaged me on a dating site, he seemed like a miracle. He was charming and supportive, exactly what I needed. He told me he was an engineer working overseas on a project, so he only had limited time to chat. We talked every day, and over the months, I felt like I'd finally found someone who understood me. Paul had this way of listening that made me feel special, and he knew everything about me, my favorite coffee, the way I liked to read by the window, even little quirks I hadn't shared with anyone else. He confided in me too, telling me stories about his life, his own heartache, and even his dream of finding someone real to come home to. After a while, it didn't even matter that we hadn't met in person. I trusted him. But then, odd things started happening. First, my mail would go missing. I shrugged it off, thinking it was a mix-up. But soon, more unsettling things started piling up. My car alarm went off at random hours, blaring in the dead of night. I'd hear strange noises outside my house, like someone shuffling around or trying the door. And sometimes late at night, I'd feel this heavy, creeping sensation like someone was watching me from the shadows. I mentioned these things to Paul, and he was incredibly supportive. "It's probably just kids playing pranks," he'd say, comforting me with his calming words. But something inside me couldn't shake the growing dread. One evening, a letter showed up in my mailbox with no return address. Inside was a simple note that read, "I know you're alone." My heart raced. Who would send this? I messaged Paul, but he didn't reply. For the first time, I felt a sense of doubt about him. Suddenly, all the personal questions he'd asked me, the way he seemed to know so much about my life, felt wrong. I did a background check on Paul, and my stomach dropped. The images he used weren't his. It belonged to a man who had no idea I even existed. Paul wasn't real. My hand shook as I searched deeper. I found that Paul had used other fake profiles and that he'd been watching me, gathering my information. My heart pounded as I realized what I was really dealing with: a catfish who targeted me specifically, someone who knew I was newly single and likely vulnerable. Then it hit me. He knew my routines, my schedule, even my ex-husband's wealth. I was nothing but a target to him, a puzzle he'd pieced together, and he was close. He had to be. That night, I packed my bag and went to stay with a friend, too terrified to stay in my own home. I still wonder about Paul, and I still don't know who he really is or how much he really knows about me. In the months that followed, I sold my house, changed my number, and moved to another state, hoping a fresh start would bring me peace. But no matter how far I go, a part of me is always looking over my shoulder. Because even now, in a new state, in a new home, I know that somewhere out there, he might still be watching.